since that time in studying NDEs, I've found that more than 90% of near-death experiencers, no matter what their cultural background across thousands of years and continents, more than 90% of people who have been where I've been in this kind of experience come back not only believing, but knowing the reality of a God force at the core of the universe. And it's irrelevant if you want to try and label that as God, Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, all the many names that we try to apply to it, denies the fact that we're referring to one reality and one knowing intelligence. And that God force is one of love, of compassion, of kindness, of mercy. And this is where, by coming to sense that kind of connection to that primordial God force in each and every one of us, it gives us the tools to really kind of rise above our little ego selves and become more of the higher soul we can.
1-0.
Hi, and welcome to the show. This is your host, Orion. If you are new here, welcome. And if you know a little bit about me from the last 400 episodes, you know that I'm a coach and a hypnotherapist, and I am obsessed with the power of your subconscious mind, how to tap into different realms, how to connect to your guides and God energy and channel it and bring love and bring change and more light into this world. So obviously, I invited today's guest because he was there. He went through a near-death experience, NDE, and he saw some truth. Eben Alexander, MD, was an academic neurosurgeon for over 25 years, including at Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. In 2008, he experienced a transformational NDE that completely changed his worldview. A pioneering scientist in the field of consciousness, he's the author of Proof of Heaven, The Map of Heaven, and Living in a Mindful Universe. We talked, of course, about his near-death experience, how meditation can help you with your life and get you more answers. We talked a little bit about psychedelics. We talked a lot about connecting to consciousness and love and changing your life. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hey, Eben, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, Orion, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on today. I look forward to our conversation.
Yes, me too. Me too. This is going to be very, very interesting. I never spoke to anyone who went through a near-death experience before, especially if he's into neuroscience, and like those two parts of the brain are very different, but you bring them both together. But before we dive in, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to point out who I was before. I had spent 54 years of my life honing a very kind of conventional scientific worldview. I was very influenced by my adoptive father. That's an important part of my history, is my adoption. I was put up for adoption when I was 11 days old, but my birth mother wouldn't sign the papers to let me go until I was 4 months old. So I spent 4 months in a baby dorm. And that kind of set the stage for my later life and a lot of things that came to great resolution with my near-death experience in 2008.
My goodness.
But until that time, I'd spent 15 years teaching neurosurgery at Harvard Medical School, thought I had some understanding of brain, mind, and consciousness. But my journey showed me very clearly that my understanding was extremely primitive, as is the understanding of our modern scientific community about the very nature of consciousness itself. And so that's why I would say my near-death experience, due to a severe case of bacterial meningitis, which is a perfect model for human death because of the way it attacks the neocortex, the human part of the brain. And to me, the revelations from that, especially the evidence from my case that there was no way my brain could have had a dream or hallucination when I was in this deep coma. This is why the scientific community takes my story so seriously. And I've worked with scientists for the 16 plus years since my coma to come to a better understanding of the nature of consciousness, the nature of reality. And it involves investigation of quantum physics, neuroscience, philosophy of mind, parapsychology, and all the evidence for non-local consciousness. These are all things we went into in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, that I wrote with my wife and partner in all this work, Karen Newell, back in 2017. And Living in a Mindful Universe goes a long way towards uniting science and spirituality, which has been the ultimate result of going through this experience and then kind of framing it up in a scientific setting.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So tell me about the experience. What happened there? You've been how long have you been in a coma?
I was in a coma for 7 days, and it was all very sudden. Happened at like 4:30 in the morning was when I had symptom onset. Within 3 hours, I was having grand mal seizures and already in deep coma at home. There's kind of a misrepresentation of my story out there that pretends that I was in a medically induced coma. But the
Mm.
reason the scientific world takes it so seriously is because of all the facts that this was a meningitis induced coma, which is very different from medication induced. And the meningitis takes away all those parts of your brain that we normally use to construct a conscious view of the world. And that's why, in many ways, that was such a gift to have that severe case of meningitis, but quickly into coma, gone from this world. And my family, very alarmed when they saw me having grand mal seizures, called the EMTs to come to our house. They couldn't break the seizures. Now, I remember none of that. I was already gone from this world. And that's when they took me to the emergency room where I had worked much as a neurosurgeon over the last 2 years before that. And Dr. Laura Potter realized I might have meningitis, did a lumbar puncture, put the needle in my back. Out came thick white pus under pressure.
Oh,
And that's when she knew I was in deep trouble and estimated I had about a 10% chance of survival to make it through that illness. And 7 days later, I wasn't showing any signs of neurologic improvement. I had not really responded to 3 powerful antibiotics. I've been on a ventilator for a week, very poor neurologic grade. This was all uh, reported in a case report on my medical records in September 2018, Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases. And that case report, written by 3 doctors not involved in my care, but fascinated by my recovery, made the point that that brain was way too ill to have a dream or hallucination. And then when challenged by the peer review editors, how do you explain his miraculous recovery? Full recovery over 2 months after this illness. That's unprecedented in the medical literature. They said it's because he had a near-death experience. That's what allowed for this absolutely astonishing kind of recovery. They knew of other cases like that, of NDEs associated with a miraculous healing. And this, I think, is one of the biggest messages to all of us is this kind of spiritual nature that we are and share with the universe is something that can allow us to participate in our own healing. But we can get into all that a little later. Back in the middle of my journey, I went through 3 major phases in this near-death experience. One important thing to point out is that an atypical feature of my NDE was that I had no memory of my life. I had no knowledge of Earth, humanity, no language, certainly no Eben Alexander personal memories. And of course, when I first came back from coma, I explained that amnesia by saying, well, it was attacking my neocortex. And kind of a rudimentary explanation would be if memories are stored in the brain, then that attack would give me the amnesia. And yet, interestingly enough, all the memories came back very rapidly
mm.
and even more complete than they had been before coma when I was waking up and then going through the recovery phase over the next few weeks. So that was a giant mystery to me. It showed me that memories are not even stored in the brain because my brain really was in no shape to harbor the memories. And when I woke up in the ICU room on day 7 of coma and they pulled out the breathing tube, the amnesia was so powerful I didn't recognize my mother, my sisters, my sons, others at the bedside. But those memories of personal relationships, of language, of all that came back very rapidly over hours and days. And that's when I started really hitting the mystery because all I knew was when I woke up in that ICU bed was where I'd just been, this incredible journey that seemed to last for months or years, this NDE. Where I went through multiple phases. It started in what I call the earthworm's eye view, a very primitive course, kind of dark and subterranean realm, but then rose up through a portal of light into this brilliant ultra-real gateway valley. And that to me was like Plato's world of ideals, but for the individual soul. I mean, there was a lot of earthly things there, but perfection. There was no sign of any death or decay. It was an absolutely beautiful realm of. This is the realm where we would have, for example, life reviews. Where your life would flash before your eyes, where you would reconnect with souls of departed loved ones, and so that's really what I witnessed in this beautiful Gateway Valley. And people who've read the book Proof of Heaven will remember that one of the biggest features of that valley was that I was a speck of awareness on a butterfly wing, millions of other butterflies looping and spiraling in these vast formations. But I wasn't alone in that journey. There was a beautiful young woman, sparkling blue eyes, high cheekbones, high forehead, broad smile, and she never said a word, but her reality, her knowing, melded with my mind in this perfect kind of coalescence of knowledge. And she reassured me, you are deeply loved and cherished forever. You have nothing to fear. You are richly cared for. And it was a very reassuring, especially as I'm just beginning to realize I remembered I've been in that place before, that beautiful spiritual realm. And it turns out that, there's much more to that story, but what ended up happening was all of this beauty and festivity of what I was witnessing in this Gateway Valley. There were thousands of people dancing in this meadow down below, children playing, dogs jumping, incredible festivities being fueled because up above were these uh, swooping orbs of angelic choirs that were emanating chants, anthems, hymns that would just thunder through my awareness and just impress me so much with the beautiful kind of binding force of love of this realm, the healing and whole nature of it all. And those angelic choirs provided yet another musical portal, because the portal that had taken me up from the earthworm my view into this brilliant valley had been musical. I remembered musical notes. And of course, this is music that is idealized. It's not in any form that you would hear with ears or would be limited by the physics of our four-dimensional space-time in production of music, but these incredible soaring kind of melodies and chants. And that's what ushered me up into the next level. And I remember seeing all of the material world, our earthly realm and all that collapsing down, all of the spiritual realm and that kind of idealized form of the Gateway Valley, all of that collapsing down into this complex, what I called an oversphere. And that was really the universe throughout all of eternity. So in that realm, you're completely outside of Earth time. You're not restricted by it at all. It's one of the reasons why these journeys are so difficult to report. We don't really have language that's very good for discussing these kinds of whole experiences that involve this great vision, seeing all of your life and past lives and even future potentials all there at once. You get a much bigger sense of your soul and who you are and how you relate to the universe at large. Anyway, in that third level, what I call the core, there was a complete resolution of all dualities. We live in a world where you have dark, light, good, evil, masculine, feminine, et cetera, all these spectra of dualities, but they're all compressed down into one pure being, pure essence in that core realm. And that's where I recognize that our very conscious awareness was directly sourced in that God force. Since that time in studying NDEs, I've found that more than 90% of near-death experiencers, no matter what their cultural background across thousands of years and continents, more than 90% of people who have been where I've been in this kind of experience come back not only believing, but knowing the reality of a God force at the core of the universe. And it's irrelevant if you want to try and label that as God, Allah, Brahman, Vishnu, Jehovah, Yahweh, Great Spirit, all the many names that we try to apply to it denies the fact that we're referring to one reality and one knowing intelligence. And that God force is one of love, of compassion, of kindness, of mercy. And this is where, by coming to sense that kind of connection to that primordial God force in each and every one of us, it gives us the tools to really kind of rise above our little ego selves and become more of the higher soul we came here to be. Now, in my journey, I would tumble back down from that lofty sanctum sanctorum of the core into that earthworm eye view. And by remembering the musical notes, the melody that had first been associated with that light portal, that's what brought me back up into the Gateway Valley again. Always that very comforting reassurance from my guardian angel on the butterfly wing, that beautiful young woman. that I was loved and cherished and had nothing to fear. And then more lessons in that realm, and then more lessons ascending up into the core realm. And there, every time I entered the core, I was told, "You're not here to stay. You're going back. We'll teach you many things." I didn't know what that meant. And in fact, initially, with these loops through these levels, I thought that going back just meant going back to that earthworm eye view, which of course was no problem, because by just remembering the musical notes, I could conjure up that light portal that took me back up into these higher spiritual realms. But there came a time when I could no longer do that and use the memory of the musical notes to get me back up into the Gateway Valley. To say I was sad at that point would be an understatement, but I also knew I could trust in the universe, that I would be taken care of. I've been shown that so many times already.
So you remembered the musical notes after your NDE, and every time in meditation you could step into those realms.
Well, the thing is, I don't have that perfect memory of the musical notes themselves from that
Yeah.
idealized realm. But what I do use for meditation is something called sacred acoustics, and I meditate an hour to a day. I've done that for the last 12 or 13 years. I've
Wow.
used it to return to my NDE, and I also highly recommend meditation because exploring consciousness is the way each and every one of us can come to realize we're much more than just a little physical body living a little life, birth to death, and nothing more as material beings. We're much grander than that. We have a connection with the universe and shared meaning and purpose that's far more kind of important than we might envision from that kind of lowly materialist body position. So this is really, in Sacred Acoustics, anybody who's interested, you can go to sacredacoustics.com and learn a lot more. It's a form of binaural beat brainwave entrainment, which to me as a neuroscientist was fascinating, because I realized when I first kind of came upon binaural beats about 2 years post-coma, that they might offer a tremendous pathway towards a liberation of conscious awareness and meditation. And it's because the sounds of sacred acoustics, of any kind of binaural beat form, focus on the lower brainstem. And that's very important, because every chant or anthem or hymn that you've ever heard that might have engendered a transcendental state of conscious awareness, those are all processed up in the acoustic cortex of the temporal lobe. These are circuits that have evolved mainly in the last 2 to 3 million years in primates and Homo sapiens. Very different are the sounds from, say, sacred acoustics. They are using a slight difference in the frequency to the two ears to influence very heavily an important nucleus way down in the lower brainstem that evolved more than 300 million years ago. That's one of the reasons why I think sacred acoustics and binaural beat brainwave entrainment in general is so powerful at liberating our conscious awareness away from the sense of here and now and sense of self. So that kind of music of sacred acoustics can be an incredibly powerful catalyst to help people get into deep conscious states. The main thing about meditation is to take that little voice in your head, the little monkey mind voice, the ego voice, and put it into timeout. Because if that little monkey mind is still chattering, you're never going to get anywhere useful in meditation. But by silencing that voice and getting yourself into a hypnagogic state, like between awake and asleep, that's what we're talking about here. That's where you really open up to the universe at large and can experience that grander consciousness that we're talking about. And the scientific model is really one of the brain serving as a transceiver, but not the producer of consciousness. So the brain gives us access to that primordial mind and that universal consciousness, but it's not creating it ultimately. And that's why NDEs, when you're at the process of dying and leaving the body behind, brain and body behind, you witness an expansion of conscious awareness, not a constriction. It's the exact opposite of what materialism would predict. Materialism being that the only stuff that exists is physical and the brain must somehow create consciousness. But that is not true. That's where the modern scientific world is going on this great revolution of understanding.
What changed in you as a person after that experience? And what changed in you since that experience to today?
Well, a very good question, because the experience itself, that will absolutely change you, because it's not something that's predictable. So it's a good thing that basically 1 in 5 people who have a cardiac arrest will also have profound kind of things that identify as a spiritual near-death experience. And often, as we've said before, that helps them to come back and heal. But what changed, I think, initially with the experience itself was it opened my eyes to the much grander nature of the universe at large and the much grander possibilities for my participation as a soul in that universe. But then the last 16 years since my coma has been spent working, first of all, as I said, with daily meditation. So I would never leave out the process of exploring consciousness. You can't just read about these things and watch the videos and figure it out. You need to have a form of centering prayer, deep meditation to start exploring consciousness, to really kind of start to witness the power you have of kind of gleaning information from the world at large and also influencing the world at large. But
Mm-hmm.
meditation is a very powerful tool for that. And also working with scientists around the world. Some people think, oh, well, what do your scientific colleagues make of this crazy story? Well, it turns out some of the best support I've gotten in this world has been from my fellow scientific colleagues.
Wow. Because they're looking for more.
Well, they know that our materialist models, physicalism or materialism, is a conventional scientific view that the whole everything that is physical, and if you can measure it, like electrons, protons, quarks, all the subatomic particles, if we can measure all of that, then we can figure out everything. And so there's this notion that there's a bottom up causality to emerging events. That you figure out the electrons, photons, protons, atoms, molecules, et cetera, and build up their laws, and that explains everything that happens in this universe. But that misses completely that what we're actually witnessing is a mental model of the universe that occurs in kind of a shared theater of mental operations. And it's a higher level of integration than just the physical world at large. And this is why the mind has the power to do such extraordinary explorations into time and space and to kind of integrate this information to come to a deeper understanding. And that's kind of our natural way of living, is in that mental realm of the universe. And the mistake that many in 20th century science, the mistake they made was to think, well, wait a minute, if this consciousness is something that's necessary for the world to exist, but consciousness didn't happen until humans evolved consciousness. That's not true. Consciousness has been with us for the whole time. And the whole universe, in a sense, is conscious and self-aware. And that's what humans borrow. That's what sentient beings borrow, is access to that mental field, that kind of unified field. And it's not something we create with our brains, but our brain does give us access to it. But the interesting thing is it also points to the fact that we have the free will to alter that emerging reality. Now, conventional materialist scientists would scoff at you if you claim to have free will, because they think it's all chemical reactions and electron fluxes in the brain of material following the laws of physics, chemistry, biology. So where in the world would you inject free will into that picture? And it's
Mm-hmm.
because their picture is wrong, that there's a higher ordering that's the mental layer of the universe. It's something that's been there since before the Big Bang. In fact, it was part of the intelligence that organized the Big Bang. And that is the part of us that is connected and that also expands tremendously when liberated from the shackles of the brain and body at the time of death. That's why near-death experiences are so important for kind of getting
Mm.
this bigger picture.
How do you connect to God consciousness on every day when you're not meditating?
Just it, I can tell you, I've long had a relationship where I felt that prayers connected, and that existed even before my coma experience, and it was mainly due to the influence of my father. He was an academic neurosurgeon, so my adoptive father, and I respected him tremendously. He ran a neurosurgical training program. He'd been a combat surgeon in the Second World War, spent more than 2 years in Pacific theater. I still have the little pocket Bible that he had with him overseas for that 2 years in World War II. It's at my bedside. It has the Psalms and New Testament, and I use that in my meditations. For me, it all comes together. There's this beautiful sense, but again, not to restrict it to any one religion. That's where people can make a big mistake. It's this one loving God is something that's available to all, and is a general concept that emerges all through religions, even ones that are thought to be kind of multi
Mm.
theistic. Have a monotheistic core like Hinduism. where there's really kind of an intelligence at the core of the universe. And that's really what NDEs teach us. And NDEs, in many ways, kind of universalize this notion of love, kindness, compassion, and mercy as part of the intelligence of the universe without claiming any kind of ideological differences. And that's
Mm.
the biggest problem with modern religions is when they start to pretend they're the only one that's important, the other people got it wrong, instead of just acknowledging the simple principles of love, compassion, kindness, mercy, acceptance, when necessary, forgiveness, and never forget gratitude. Those are the key ingredients to kind of a modern spiritual reality and acknowledging that we're spiritual beings in a spiritual universe. And this can be a very healing kind of recognition. And that's why I highly recommend people meditate, centering prayer. For me, it's all the same thing, but this is a way of connecting to that God force in a meaningful way that can help us come into health and healing in our own lives. And we do that best by bringing it into this world for others too.
How do you think our prayers affect the field, affect the matrix, that consciousness, or collaborate with the consciousness?
I think it's important to point out that the prayers, from my point of view, are most effective when they align with the highest good for all involved.
Mm.
So, in other words, it definitely involves getting the ego out of the way. And narcissists and egotistical souls can have a lot of trouble with this. But I think when you come into alignment and realizing that helping others and bringing love and compassion into the lives of others is one of the greatest ways to have the universe shower us with love and compassion. In many ways, the way we treat the world is the way that the universe will treat us. And I think very instructive in this discussion is the whole notion of the life review, your life flashing before your eyes, which is a common theme in near-death experience literature. It occurs in 25 to 50% of all series of NDEs. And the most crucial things to point out about life reviews, and this is coming from an academic paper by Dr. Bruce Grayson. He's a skeptical psychiatrist who has studied NDEs for more than 45 years. He wrote a paper in fall of 2021 in the Journal of the Journal of Near-Death Studies. And in that, he discussed almost 700 life reviews in his big series of NDE cases. And roughly a third of those patients reported a complete life review. It involved everything in their life. So that tells you this is in a totally timeless realm, because some of these would occur during a 10-minute cardiac arrest. How can you go through your whole life in 10 minutes? Well, you
Mm.
can, because in that realm, it's timeless. You extend throughout much greater swathes of time in getting the information. But also important to point out in that 700 or so cases of life reviews, about 3/4 of people reported that the life review involved everybody who was involved in the various events. So, in other words, if you were busy handing out pain and suffering to others, uh, in the life review, you get on the receiving end of that.
Oh, wow. You see it from all directions. You sense it from all directions.
But the important thing is it shows the multidirectionality that we're always kind of engaging with the universe. So if you hand out a lot of love and compassion and kindness, that's what tends to come back to you. If you hand out a lot of pain and suffering to others in the life review, that's what will come back to you. And it gently nudges us towards acknowledging the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated, which is written into the very fabric of the universe when you witness these kind of life reviews and their importance. The other important thing is about 2/3 of those respondents in the 700 life review cases uh, said that it was more real than living events of this world. So, in other words, this is not imagination, it's not dreams. It's much more important than that. And this is why meditation is critical, because meditation allows all of us to start discovering that much grander kind of connection we have with the universe at large. And this is why Karen and I are such huge proponents of meditation. If anybody here needs a tool to help them silence that little monkey mind voice in the head, sacredacoustics.com is a beautiful resource. And like I said, I'm a personal user. I've used that roughly daily for an hour or two for the last 12, 13.
So your wife know She got married to a very left brain person, very scientific, and a week later, he wakes up and he's completely different. How was how did that affect your relationship?
Well, my former spouse and I have split up since then.
Oh, okay,
And it
okay.
turns out that about 85% of NDEers end up going through a divorce.
Okay, wow. Because it's different level of consciousness, and you can't just get there's a bigger gap.
It is.
So,
It just, and there's nothing to blame. My former spouse and I still get along wonderfully. We have two sons, that we share their upbringing, and we're still in close communication. But I also met my current life partner, Karen Newell, who's the co-author of the book Living in a Mindful Universe. I met her about 12 years ago. I immediately knew we shared this kind of mission to help bring this world to a higher level, and I could sense that. I think I sensed it before she did. Uh,
mm,
but and this is the stuff we talk about at home all the time, believe it or not. But it's our passion. It's what we love as soul, and the higher good, and the binding force of love, and the true nature of consciousness and of reality. I mean, this is stuff we are passionately involved in. And this is why I love the work that I do with Karen, the workshops that we do, both on Zoom and in presence around the world, to help people get into deep transcendental meditative states, to discuss this bigger literature of kind of the one mind, and how really the modern scientific community, through quantum physics, neuroscience, philosophy of mind, and through the non-local nature of consciousness, through parapsychology, all of that is pointing us in a direction of understanding that we're all connected to this universe through that mental layer. And that's a very important thing, because it brings to fore the power of our free will and our ability to influence our emerging reality. And that's
mm.
especially important when it comes to our health and healing, because any physical, mental, or emotional health is ultimately dependent on our spiritual health.
Everything can heal? Do you believe everything can heal?
I believe that, well, first of all, I would say that the things that need healing, the challenges and hardships, illness and injury, in many ways are stepping stones that mark the path forward. It's how we deal with those hardships. So, in other words, embrace the hardships, but also know that there are ways that they are here to instruct us into ways that we can influence our lives and the universe at large, to help bring it into greater alignment, wholeness, healing, and completion. In other words, we can direct this more towards the kind of the way that our souls came here to direct it. And in many ways, this is the evolution of consciousness itself, which I think is the reason all of this stuff exists, is really so we can know more about our relationship with the universe at large. And ultimately, we're all sharing the mind of the universe. That's the most important thing. So that intelligence is actually evolving. Just like that old saying, all politics is local. All evolution of cosmic consciousness is nothing more than individual sentient beings coming to a deeper understanding of their own relationship with the universe at large, in terms of shared meaning and purpose, and a shared connection through this mental realm.
Do you connect with angels or guides or ascended masters? How does it work for you?
For me, it's all about connection with angels and guides. And I certainly, my own guardian angel, who was so obvious to me in that beautiful adventure during my NDE, is, to anyone who's read the book Proof of Heaven, they'll realize the way that whole story comes together is through an acknowledgement 4 months after my coma of the identity of that beautiful woman. Because I'd never read the near death literature before. I didn't care about it. I thought it's all hallucinations. After having my own experience, you can bet I had to read everything I could get my hands on. But my older son, Eben the Fourth, was majoring in neuroscience in college at the time. And he told me, write everything down you can remember from your experience before you read anybody else's experience.
Oh,
That
great.
was the
Yes.
best advice I've ever got.
Yes, I won't be diluted or.
Yeah, totally. So I wrote 20,000 words before I read anyone else's NDE. Uh, and that's kind of my raw database. But then beyond that, um, the kind of awakening, reading about all these experiences, I realized that that beautiful girl on the butterfly wing, who was so prominent in my journey, I knew her so well from having our mind meld experience, and yet I didn't know who she was in my life. Because all these NDE reports, they knew who that person was in their life. And as I mentioned before, of course, I had that amnesia during my NDE, which was a necessary step to go deep enough to convince me of the reality of all of it. As a practicing neuroscientist, I needed a really deep dive, and that's actually what I got. And yet, it was a mystery to me. Who was she? How come I knew her so well, and yet I don't know who she was in my life? And that's why when you read Proof of Heaven, you'll get the shocking and amazing answer to that, and it has to do with my adoption history, and and it has to do with a birth sister that I never knew in this life, who had passed from this world back in 1998, 2 years before I even found out about her existence. Anyway, there's a big story to that. Well, it's because she's here. She is here. I've uh, seen her many a time in meditation, and so often when I talk about her, in public presentations, people have taken pictures of me on stage, and they'll see these big kind of purple and bright orbs floating around me whenever I get to the part about my guardian angel. So anyway, there's a lot to that story. Very powerful.
Yeah, I was with my husband. We went to a park with my husband and my son, and I took a photo, and there is a huge green orb in the photo. Only in one photo. And it cannot be a speck of dust. It just
No,
so
no, the
pronounced.
orbs are very real, and I've seen them in other settings too. In fact, my older son and I one time invited orbs in while he was playing the piano. Just any kind of joyous, childish play can often bring orbs to the situation, and orbs started showing up on the video camera. It was amazing.
That's
So anyway, yes, people, the orb phenomenon is a real phenomenon. They seem to be kind of spiritual entities. I don't know much more than that, but they do tend to show up in settings where they're invited in the sense of love and openness and kind of a childhood fascination with the universe. That's
hmm.
what invites the orbs into play.
So you said it's very hard to describe the sensation and probably the sound frequency, the light frequency, whatever you experience there, the pure joy, the love, God's love, the non-duality, something that cannot be expressed in words because words are very limited. So how can one step into those rounds? Do you have to meditate every day? Do you have to go on the top of a mountain? What do you have to do?
No, I would say that meditating daily is a very good practice. Meditation, centering prayer, whatever your form of kind of becoming one and at peace with the universe at large, with that God force. And especially important is to deactivate that little ego mind, the little monkey chatterbox in the head, that running stream of thoughts. If that's still going, you need more help because you're trying to get to that hypnagogic space between awake and asleep, where the will of your ego is no longer trying to dominate what's going on in your thinking, but you open up and trust in the universe to show you what you need. Sometimes my intention for a meditation might be as general as, what do I need to know right now? Just that simple, that open. But
Mm.
oftentimes I have a more direct kind of statement or question going into a meditation. And of course, it's my little ego mind, the voice in my head, making that request, but then it goes into timeout. And I've learned to ride the tones of Sacred Acoustics. If you listen to Sacred Acoustics, you'll see what I mean. There's a free 20-minute OM download available there at sacredacoustics.com. And likewise, on my website, there's a very uh, good intro to all this. It's completely free. It's called Your 33-Day Journey into the Heart of Consciousness. And that's right there on the entry page at ebenalexander.com. And there are 4 Sacred Acoustics files included in that 33-day journey. So every bit of that's free. There's a community of more than 12,000 people who have taken that 33-day journey course. So I would encourage anybody who's intrigued by this information and wants to learn more about us, go to ebenalexander.com, and you can explore the website in general. The reading list is useful, FAQ page, etc. But there you can join that 33-day journey and start right away getting some of the major concepts of our third book, Living in a Mindful Universe.
Beautiful. What do you think about psychedelics? Because it seems like psychedelics can bring people to, like, certain psychedelics to this type of realms.
Well, I think psychedelics are very important in one sense. Now, first of all, I want to put it out front here. I do not recommend the casual use of psychedelics for any of this kind of spiritual work. Because to me, although they do give us a glimpse into that richer world, they also, we've encountered people who really get sucked into the psychedelic world, and I think they completely miss the spiritual side.
Mm.
Now, here are two important points about psychedelics, though. One is, luckily, the research work with functional MRI, magnetoencephalography, the many ways we look at the brain have proven to us that psychedelic experiences are not caused by the brain. The brain's actually getting out of the way. The default mode network is disappearing. You won't find any neuronal cell anywhere in the brain that's more active on psychedelics than less. Everything gets less active. And that just shows you that the brain is not creating all that. The brain's getting out of the way. So when I heard that, I knew, oh my gosh, of course, because I knew what it was like when meningitis deactivated my brain and gave me this tremendous expansion of consciousness. And psychedelics don't do it by activating the brain. The brain's getting out of the way. So it's proving to us the brain is not the ultimate creator of consciousness itself. Point one. The second point is that Roland Griffiths at Johns Hopkins has done some very elegant work with psilocybin, magic mushrooms, where he showed that a single dose of psilocybin in the treatment of severe addictions, alcoholism, opiates, nicotine, which is one of the worst physiologic addictions, or in the treatment of debilitating fear of death in terminal cancer patients, that one dose of psilocybin still gave a very promising benefit to 80% of the patients a year after that dosing. So in other words, you don't keep taking the psychedelic. I think the psychedelic serves as a catalyst to open you up to that grander sense of higher soul and self and possibility for meaning and purpose. So to me, meditation is a much better, more steady and powerful way to achieve the same result over time. So the psychedelics, although for some people it might be important as a one-time experience to help kind of open their mind to this possibility, I think it's very tragic that some people get sucked into using, a lot of psychedelics to try and get into this spiritual reality, because the spiritual wisdom is something that doesn't demand the psychedelic at all. And we can all come into that kind of greater wisdom through meditation. So I'm a very big proponent of meditation and centering prayer.
I had some experts about psychedelics on the show, and I agree with what you're saying. Where it needs to be, if somebody wants to do it, because sometimes addictions cannot be solved. Sometimes there are things that sometimes meditation is not enough, and people with some severe fears or severe traumas got healed with psychedelics. It's about the container of how you do it, the intention you do it, and the people you do it with. And when you don't do it just to have fun, um, but if there is a desire to explore it, you want to explore it with the right people, the right situation, legit. It needs to be legit. Needs to be true.
And
Um,
I would say it's certainly one clue is if you find yourself going to the psychedelic week after week after week,
no, no, that's destructive.
you're not following the proper pathway.
Yeah.
But if you can build meditation in, I think you'll find quickly that it's a very kind of loving and forgiving way to dive deep into that same territory. In fact, I was part of a study to compare um, psychedelic experiences with NDEs because I'd had a very powerful NDE.
That's very interesting.
Well, I actually got involved in a dose escalation study using 5-methoxy DMT
Wow.
and up to 48 milligrams. And I know what that showed me. And yes, I believe that takes us to the same kind of spiritual realm as an NDE. But the comparison I would use is, for me, the psychedelic was like trying to see it all through a tiny little keyhole where you couldn't really make out anything. Versus the view from the NDE, which is panoramic penthouse view of the universe.
You also had 7 days of that. 7 days of panoramic view of every nook and cranny of the universe.
Yeah, so that's a gigantic thing. But in other words, the psychedelics might be helpful to some people, with a one-time dose. But if you're using a lot more than that, I'm not so sure the psychedelic is really giving you the spiritual wisdom you're seeking. And I would highly recommend building in meditation or centering prayer, some form of going within, achieving a hypnagogic space where you're able to put the little voice, in your head into timeout and allow that much richer connection with the primordial mind, the God mind of the universe. That's where the meditation can really help you move beyond anything you can achieve with just the psychedelics alone.
And I agree with you. You gotta do the work. You gotta do the work. You gotta meditate. You gotta connect with yourself. You gotta heal your traumas. And then if you choose to do the psychedelics, then you're ready. You gotta be ready. You don't do it if you're not ready. So absolutely, safety, readiness, consciousness, container. I agree with everything you said, and daily meditation is probably the key because you're getting the vessel strong enough to receive so much light.
Exactly. That's a very good way of putting it. And also, it's not really work. When I say do the work, well, that's true. But for me, I very much look forward to my meditation every day. And I also assure you, and I'm sure this is no news to you, but your mind changes over time. And when you meditate frequently, that ready connection with the mind of the universe and that binding force of love starts to become much more natural in your normal waking state. And so it starts to become who you are. And I love how my partner and wife, Karen Newell, puts it, be the love that you are.
Aw.
It's much more simple. We're not, trying to love as an action, but we are all agents of pure love from that spiritual realm. And that's what NDEers have been seeing for thousands of years. They see that connection of love, the binding force of love, and how it brings us all together and
Yeah.
brings wholeness and healing to the world. And this is why, for example, studies that look at, say, a community and the crime level in a community, if you get up to 3% of the people in that community meditating, in some studies, that seems to be sufficient to really alter in a beneficial way what's going on in the community. So crime statistics will drop down dramatically and things like that. So meditation can, when we work to bring this love to the world, it benefits the world at large. And it doesn't require that every single soul be meditating. All of us can do some good to bring that good into the world. But the meditation starts with us. And that's why in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, Karen and I made a big point of giving people practical information about meditation. That's also what people will get in that 33-day journey. That's a free course on ebenalexander.com, is a lot of practical tips about meditation and about how to see this kind of bigger picture of the world at large that includes our primordial consciousness, this primordial mind that we're all part of, and also the eternal nature of our souls and their interactions that govern the emerging reality of this world in a way that far exceeds what would be possible from simply materialist particles colliding and trying to guess their way into a future.
Right.
This is about something that is guided in a top-down fashion, not bottom-up.
If you had to go back and give advice to your younger self, the one that did not experience the NDE, what would you tell him?
I would simply say that, trust in love and spend some time in meditation and centering prayer, and you will find the answers. And the answers can be very reassuring and affirming of kind of a positive nature of our spirit and of the world at large. In the current era, there's a lot of conflict, political polarization, a lot of misinformation, and people shouting at each other. And yet, the deeper truth is something we can all come to in meditation and centering prayer, that there is a very peaceful, harmonious way forward that allows us to work together, live together, and kind of love together and show that binding force of love and bring it to this world at large. And it's the greatest gift for the individual. It's kind of the paradox of egocentrism and that narcissism, that they're torturing themselves, to this horrible situation where nothing is good enough,
Mm.
as opposed to recognizing that when we put the little demands of the ego into timeout and start to honor our higher soul, that is really an honoring of kind of the mind of the universe and that binding force of love that is so obvious to near-death experiencers. That's why They come back to this world not fearing death, and why more than 90% of near-death experiences come back knowing in the reality of that loving, intelligent God force at the core of the universe. And this is a real beautiful, harmonious lesson for all of us. But the good news is you don't have to wait for the rest of the world to do this. Anyone can make the decision to start meditating on a regular basis, centering prayer, going within, acknowledging a deeper connection with that God force at the core of the universe, and starting to bring that love, serve as a conduit to bring that love and kindness and compassion into this world in all of our thoughts and actions.
Beautifully said, and thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, for the light that you are in the world. Thank you for sharing so much love and preaching love and being love.
Well, Orion, thank you very much, and thanks for what you do getting this out to the world. Very helpful, and I appreciate all your efforts and appreciate especially your invitation to have me on today. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.